which brings us down to a name everybody knows, number 47, one of the greatest rebounders and defensive players of all time, Dennis Rodman.
Number 47, Dennis Rodman.
Now, his individual accolades are slim. We talked just a moment ago about first and second team All-NBAs. He has 0, and he only has 2-time. He only 2 times was third team All-NBA. However, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and that speaks to, and we're going to talk about this, how disrespected defense is on some of these end-of-year awards or lists. Twice, he was considered the single best defensive player in basketball. And yet, none of those times was anyone like, well, that means he's got to be one of the 10 best players in the whole sport. No, that's not how it works. 7-time All-Defense first team, another additional time All-Defense second team, 7-time rebounding champion, and where the majority of his real heft in deserving this ranking is his participation on great teams and his contribution to those teams. So Dennis played 14 years in the NBA. 9 of those 14, he made a conference finals. 6 of those 14, he made an NBA finals. 5 of those 14, he was an NBA champion. He played 169 career playoff games, 102 full seasons of playoff games, averaging 10 rebounds per game in those playoff games. He was a massive part of the mini dynasty in Detroit. He was a massive part of the final 3 championships for the Bulls with Michael. In those 3 finals, he had to guard Shawn Kemp, Karl Malone, wear them out, tire them out, and make them work on when they had the ball through his defense. And it is not a coincidence that despite the fact that he was not as good as he once was, and the Bulls were the 2-time defending champs, that in 98, you saw it in The Last Dance, how much rope they gave him because they knew in the biggest spots they needed him. Also, it is interesting because when you talk about the greatest defenders that are non-centers, greatest non-center defenders of the last 50 years, Dennis Rodman's going to come up. Scottie Pippen's going to come up. Not one of the greatest ever, but Ron Harper was a hell of a defender. What do all 3 of those guys have in common? Oh, they were all in the 96 to 98 Bulls together. That's very interesting because I was told Michael always guarded the other team. Was Michael guarding the 4th best player on the other team? I'm going to have to look into that. But Rodman was a massive part of winning throughout the entirety of his prime. And so I understand he doesn't have the traditional numbers that go along with a placement on this list, but he was such a dominant defensive force that I think there's no question he deserves to be on this list. I thought he got snubbed from the NBA's original all-time top 50. I'm glad he was included on the updated top 75. We'll take a caller on Dennis Rodman's career before we wrap up with him.
What's up, Nick and Devontae? It's Ange from LA. I'm a longtime Nick Wright stan, first-time caller. And my question for Nick is about Dennis Rodman. Can a guy who can't even score be top 50 of all time? To me, it's giving very much Draymond Green minus the passing plus the crazy red hair. Please weigh in. Tell me what's right.
So Ange is right in this regard. He couldn't score, and he's not as good of a passer as Draymond Green. Now, Draymond also, we'll see how many more titles he wins. We'll see how much longer his career goes. Draymond has a case to be on the next version of this list, 75 of the last 75, something like that. Like Draymond, I'm not dismissing him. But as good of a defender as Draymond is, Rodman, I feel, was a touch more impactful. In fact, of the last 50 years, the only 2 guys who are hands down better defenders than Dennis Rodman are Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan. After that, Dennis is at least in the argument with everybody else. And that first title he won was Chicago. Again, I want to remind people how that series went. The Bulls, the 72-win Bulls jumped out to a 3-0 series lead. And then only once they were down 0-3 did George Karl in his infinite wisdom let Gary Payton start to guard Michael Jordan. He gave Michael fits. I know Michael acted in The Last Dance like he didn't. Go look at the box scores. He gave Michael fits. And all of a sudden, Seattle wins game 4. Then Seattle wins game 5. Now all of a sudden, game 6, it felt like the Bulls had to win it. Michael still is dealing with Gary Payton. And Dennis Rodman throws up a 9-19-5-3 while guarding Shawn Kemp. Then the next 2 years in the finals guarded Karl Malone and gave Malone fits both series when Malone was winning MVPs in this league. So Dennis Rodman, if we're going to value defense at all, and you're one of the 5 greatest defensive players of the last 50 years, you've got to be one of the 50 greatest overall players of the last 50 years.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show, and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.